End times, elites, counter-elites, and the path of political disintegration. Written by Peter Turchin. Introduction. The long rhythms of history. Across the millennia, civilizations have risen like waves, cresting in prosperity and confidence before breaking against the rocks of their own contradictions. Egypt, Rome, the Abbasid Caliphate, Ming China, and countless others have traced the same arc. Growth, golden age, stagnation, collapse. The pattern is so consistent that it suggests more than coincidence, it suggests law. Human history does not move in a straight line of progress, but in cycles of accumulation and decay. Periods of stability are built on cooperation and shared purpose. As wealth grows, cohesion weakens. Inequality widens, elites multiply, and social trust erodes. In time, discontent becomes crisis, and crisis becomes transformation. This rhythm is not moral punishment or divine design, it is structural. Civilizations decay when their success generates pressures their institutions cannot contain. Growth produces elites faster than power can absorb them. The gap between rulers and ruled widens until legitimacy dissolves. The result is not sudden collapse, but gradual unraveling. Faith in leaders falters, corruption spreads, violence becomes thinkable. Every end time begins invisibly, in the slow corrosion of fairness, in the quiet alienation of citizens, in the widening gulf between wealth and meaning. Chapter 1. The Science of History. To understand these cycles requires more than narrative, it requires measurement. Cliodynamics, the quantitative study of historical dynamics, treats societies as complex systems that follow discernible patterns. Just as ecosystems rise and fall with energy and scarcity, civilizations rise and fall with cohesion and inequality. At the heart of these models lie three forces: population pressure, elite overproduction, and declining social cooperation. When resources grow scarce or opportunities narrow, competition intensifies, not just among common people, but especially among elites. As the upper class expands faster than the positions of privilege available, rivalry turns to instability. These dynamics operate over centuries, but they always follow the same logic. A society flourishes when elites restrain their own appetites, when institutions balance ambition with accountability. It declines when those mechanisms fail, when wealth pools upward, when opportunity shrinks, and when the educated and ambitious find themselves excluded. The strength of cliodynamics lies in its humility. It does not claim to predict specific events, but to reveal the structural pressures beneath them. Rebellions, financial crashes, or political collapses may appear spontaneous, yet each rests on measurable stresses that have been building for decades. The mathematics of history, properly read, is a warning system. Chapter 2. The Rise of the Elites. Every era of stability eventually gives birth to its undoing. As prosperity grows, so does the number of people who seek to benefit from it. Over time, the ruling class expands beyond the capacity of the system to reward ambition. This process, elite overproduction, is the silent engine of disintegration. New wealth produces new power seekers, financiers, politicians, intellectuals, and professionals competing for influence. Initially, their energy drives innovation, but when rewards become scarce, competition turns destructive. Politics becomes polarized, not because citizens change, but because elites do, fractured into rival factions, each convinced it alone deserves control. The early warning signs of elite overproduction are subtle. Corruption scandals multiply, merit loses meaning, and leadership becomes performative. As positions at the top stagnate, frustrated elites look for other routes through ideology, media, or populist revolt. The system, once built on shared norms, fractures into tribes of self-interest. History's great collapses often began not from poverty below, but from excess above. Rome's senatorial rivalries, France's aristocratic privileges before 1789, and America's gilded wealth today all illustrate the same law. When the powerful become too numerous to share power peacefully, the structure beneath them begins to crack. Chapter 3: The Counter-Elites and the Seeds of Chaos. Every surplus of elites creates its mirror image, a surplus of the disillusioned. These are the counter-elites, the educated but excluded, the ambitious without avenues. Often drawn from middle classes or educated youth, they carry both the knowledge to challenge authority and the resentment to justify doing so. The counter-elite does not begin as revolutionary. It begins as disappointed. It consists of lawyers without cases, graduates without prospects, journalists without trust, and politicians without office. Denied access to the hierarchy they were trained to join, they redirect their talents toward opposition. When such groups coalesce around grievances, ideology gives their frustration a name. Radical movements are born from this meeting of resentment and vision, a coalition of those who once believed in the system and now feel betrayed by it. From this tension arise demagogues, reformers, and visionaries alike. Civilizations often underestimate the power of these excluded elites. They are articulate, organized, and morally charged. They turn the dissatisfaction of the masses into coherent narratives of blame and hope. When institutions lose credibility, these voices fill the vacuum. Every revolution begins as an argument before it becomes a battle. Chapter 4: The Spiral of Inequality and Violence. As elites multiply and counter-elites mobilize, the rest of society becomes the battleground. Inequality, already widening, feeds resentment from below. The working classes, burdened by stagnating wages and rising costs, lose faith in fairness. Trust in government, media, and law fades. At this stage, politics ceases to mediate conflict and instead mirrors it. Parties radicalize. Compromise becomes betrayal. Violence, once unthinkable, begins to seem inevitable. Each side interprets the other not as opponent, but as existential threat. The social fabric tears, not at once, but thread by thread. History's data reveal that such periods of polarization often precede spikes in political unrest and bloodshed. The pattern is self-reinforcing. Inequality breeds alienation. Alienation fuels extremism. Extremism justifies repression. The cycle continues until exhaustion forces reform or collapse. Modern technology amplifies the spiral. Media ecosystems reward outrage. Wealth concentrates faster than ever. The structure that once held society together, shared truth, dissolves into noise. Beneath the chaos, the underlying dynamics remain the same as they were in Rome, France, or the Qing dynasty. Too many elites, too little trust, too little justice. Chapter 5: The Crisis Stage. When a society enters its crisis stage, institutions falter. Governments lose legitimacy, laws lose respect, and economics becomes politics by other means. Violence, once rare, becomes systemic, whether through street unrest or rhetorical warfare. This phase often unfolds as a contest between reform and repression. Moderates call for renewal. Radicals demand rupture. The old elite seeks to preserve its privileges, while the counter-elites push to overthrow them. If compromise fails, the result is disintegration. Civil wars, revolutions, and authoritarian takeovers are all different faces of the same structural collapse. The critical variable is cohesion, what Turchin calls social cooperation. Societies that still retain a core of solidarity, however small, can navigate the storm through reform. Those that lose it entirely descend into fragmentation. Crisis is both danger and opportunity. It exposes the limits of self-interest and the necessity of shared fate. Civilizations that survive do so not by denying the storm, but by letting it clarify what must change. The test of a people is not whether they avoid crisis, but whether they learn from it. Chapter 6. The Paths to Renewal. History's cycles are not fatalistic. Collapse is not destiny, but the endpoint of uncorrected imbalance. Renewal begins when societies rediscover solidarity, when enough citizens, elite and ordinary alike, choose restraint over rivalry. Reform requires more than new laws. It requires a shift in moral imagination. The powerful must accept limits to their privileges, and the excluded must believe again in participation rather than vengeance. Successful renewal often comes through redistribution, institutional redesign, and moral reawakening, a new social contract that resets the scale of fairness. Periods of crisis can incubate progress. The Great Depression birthed modern welfare states. The wars of early modern Europe gave rise to centralized governance. The turbulence of the 1960s expanded civil rights. Each transformation came at immense cost, but proved that decline can turn into adaptation. Renewal begins not at the top or bottom, but in the middle, in the fragile space where shared identity can still form. When people begin to imagine a common future larger than their fears, the cycle bends toward cohesion once more. Conclusion. The long view of civilization. History does not end in catastrophe. It repeats in rhythm. Each generation inherits a set of tensions it did not create and must decide whether to perpetuate them or resolve them. The laws that govern collapse also govern renewal. Societies that understand their own structure can intervene before disintegration becomes destiny. The lesson of these recurring end times is humility. Power, wealth, and success contain the seeds of their decay. Every civilization must learn to limit its own excess, to refresh its moral core before crisis forces it to. The alternative is a world governed by resentment and decay, a world that forgets the cost of imbalance until it must pay it again. What appears as decline may also be preparation. The fractures of the present are not only signs of decay, but invitations to redesign the architecture of cooperation. The long view of civilization is not tragic, but instructive. History's cycles remind us that what has fallen before can rise again, not identical, but wiser. Thanks for listening.
Did you enjoy this book summary? Got ideas on how we can make it even better? Drop us a quick note. We're always listening and learning from you.